Dimension X, you would think the name says it all. A dimension so hostile, so tangled in perpetual conflict that even the show's antagonist can barely control it for a single episode. But the reality of Dimension X in the 1987 TMNT cartoon cuts sharper than its reputation as a simple villain's lair. Krang, the infamously disembodied brain, didn't just happen to crawl out of this parallel universe. He was a warlord exiled from a dimension originally governed by theocrats who banished all warlords that nobody there could put the pieces back together once he was gone. While Earth might see Dimension X as a shadowy backdrop to Krang's schemes, on his home turf, he's a deposed warlord whose banishment triggers the exact kind of chaos he's blamed for starting. The show gives you the headline, a realm of pure chaos and evil, but then spends a decade showing you just how unstable that label is. Take the Rock Soldiers, Krang's personal army made of living stone, entirely native to Dimension X. These aren't mercenaries smuggled in from some other quadrant or conjured by sorcery. They're the foundation of Krang's military regime, and they exist in the first place because Krang had both the means and the power to summon them as his personal army from across the dimension. Their loyalty isn't forced, Dimension X is where they belong, and before Krang ever set foot on Earth, these stone giants enforced his will across a sprawling, red-tinged expanse that is alternately called a galaxy and dimension. The show never quite nails down which, and honestly, given what we actually see, that confusion becomes a plot point unto itself. Multiple adventure arcs confirm that Dimension X contains entire planets, each one wild enough to host a full episode's worth of hazards and politics, and yet all unified by a vivid sky that defines its visual identity across the series, though conditions shift by continuity. The Neutrinos are a contradiction given form. While Dimension X gets painted with the broad brush of evil, the Neutrinos, peace-loving, hot rod-driving, 1950s-inspired teenagers, exist as walking refutations. They want nothing to do with the war Krang instigated or the Rock Soldiers' imperial ambitions. Their technology is advanced but non-violent, speed, not weaponry. Every time the Turtles run into them, they're either fleeing some new crackdown or trying desperately to carve out a patch of peace in between military offensives. The show doesn't treat them as comic relief or background noise. The Neutrinos are recurring, vocal, and utterly uninterested in the chaos and evil designation that their dimension keeps getting saddled with. They're proof that Dimension X isn't a monolith. It's a battleground, and not everyone in it wants to fight. At its most visually extreme, Dimension X is the opposite of the clean, ordered lines of Earth. Floating rocks, looming fortresses, and red skies filled with debris set the stage for battle after battle, and not just as a throwaway scenic choice. The Technodrome, Krang and Shredder's iconic mobile fortress, spends key stretches of the series pulsing right at the heart of Dimension X, acting at different times as a prison, a laboratory, and a launching pad for invasions. Whenever the heroes venture through a portal, they're more likely to enter one of the many war-ravaged planets within the dimension than a random patch of empty space. Across the series run, this pattern repeats. Dimension X isn't a blank slate. It's a web of worlds locked in a conflict that never resets. So, let's grant the dimensional evil label for a second, at least for Krang's faction. His rock soldiers are ruthless, his fortress is built for war, and his personal rule was so destructive that banishing him didn't end the conflict. That old label, a realm of pure chaos and evil, is true at the edges. But it can't explain the Neutrinos, can't explain the divided populations on the other planets, and absolutely can't explain why even the bad guys keep arguing about who truly controls the place after Krang's exile. The core contradiction is front and center. Yes, Dimension X births villains, but it's also stubbornly, persistently alive, with populations who resist, who endure, who build lives under siege. And the show's own visuals back that up, with every landscape full of activity, and every society battered but unreduced by Krang's legacy. Before you point out that not every story focuses on that complexity, you're right. Some episodes treat Dimension X as a danger zone, alien and unwelcoming, but the series never lets you forget there are real stakes beneath the laser fire. The Neutrinos living in open defiance of Krang, the Rock Soldiers executing campaigns for a lost master, scattered civilians caught between uprisings. All those elements keep Dimension X from settling into the role of cartoon villain backdrop. The crucial takeaway is that Dimension X matters not just because it's the origin of Krang or the Technodrome or 100 villainous plans. It matters because it's alive, complicated, and fundamentally political, a whole ecosystem of natives, factions, and civilians who have history, memory, and agency. The Turtles are intruders, not tourists. Krang is a former king, not a lone mad scientist, and the very chaos the show sold as intrinsic is really the aftershock of a coup that never ended. Dimension X isn't just the stage, it's a parallel power system that keeps the multiverse in constant tension. Every time the portal opens, what spills out is chaos, yes, but also the reminder that every dimension in TMNT isn't just a place. It's a problem to be solved, a society to be navigated, and a war still looking for an ending. Battle Nexus. If Dimension X is a distant battleground, the Battle Nexus is the tournament hall where the action moves right up against the Turtles. Immediate, personal, and all but impossible to avoid. Where Dimension X was mostly inaccessible, its violence the stuff of portals and special episodes, the Battle Nexus from the 2003 animated series drops the Turtles into the thick of an interdimensional fighting championship that any one of them could be called to at any time. You go from cosmic wars to a concrete arena, and the shift wasn't just cosmetic, it redefined how the TMNT franchise handles cross-dimensional storylines. The tournament format in 2003 was self-contained. The Turtles trained, fought, and sometimes triumphed under tightly managed rules, and nothing spilled over from other continuities. The arena was tangible, the spectators could be counted on screen, and even when the stakes soared, it felt like a game with a recognizable end state rather than a maelstrom of war with no off switch. That might sound like a limitation, a local event rather than a multiversal one, but it was precisely that narrative discipline that let the concept expand later in the comic series. TMNT, Battle Nexus, the IDU comic release years later, its debut issue set for November 12, 2025, publicly announced at SDCC, took everything defined in the animated run and threw it into overdrive. Now, it's not just the 2003 Turtles in the ring. Turtles from alternate continuities show up as opponents, driven into the arena by a twisted villain bent on annihilating the multiverse. A villain whose entire function is to orchestrate these unlikely, even impossible matchups. Each issue features backup stories built around the premise, Turtles from entirely different universes, thrown together by an external force, fighting not just for their own timelines, but for a kind of multiversal legitimacy. The rules of the Battle Nexus in the IDW era aren't set by local tradition or even by the old tournament directors. It's Mr. Ogg's circus now, and every continuity is fair game. The pivot is this. The rules that kept the tournament isolated in a single universe are gone. It was formed as a peaceful solution to the bloody tournament that came before. Now, any turtle from any official animated continuity can step into the arena, no explanation required. The backup stories each add something new, a matchup never seen on screen, a pairing unthinkable when the 2003 series first aired, and confirmation that Battle Nexus is not a historical event, but a persistent, structural reality in the TMNT multiverse. It doesn't end, it just waits for new entrants. Some might say all of this is just a clever way of getting more action out of the franchise. Sure, that's a reasonable explanation. The crossover has always been the go-to move for superhero comics running low on storylines, but here's what that surface-level answer leaves out. The IDW comic doesn't just mash up characters for spectacle, it stages these tournaments as real, consequential trials where the very logic of the multiverse is at stake. There are in-universe reasons, villain plots, continuity, ripples, but mostly, the Battle Nexus operates as a standing invitation to test not just the heroes, but the very nature of multiversal coherence in TMNT. The facts are impossible to ignore. The Battle Nexus has transformed from an interesting quirk in a single animated series to a kind of backbone for how the TMNT universe handles the realities of multiple coexisting continuities. It's not a one-off stunt, and it's not a glorified exhibition match. It's now the arena where the deepest questions about identity, legacy, and what makes each set of turtles unique are put to the test over and over again as part of the very structure of the multiverse. That structure can't be reduced to a single winner or a final battle. It's the glue that holds the TMNT continuities in constant conversation, even confrontation, with one another. Subscribe and tell us in the comments which dimension you think was the most ruthless, the most misunderstood, or just flat out the weirdest. let's get back into it. Cyberspace. The 2003 series' 7th and final season, Back to the Sewer, introduced a dimension that functions more like a systems architecture than a place. Back to the Sewer is the 7th season of the 2003 TMNT series, featuring cyberspace as a key setting, the mechanism enabling access to cyberspace, and immediately demonstrated what happens when that access goes wrong. The villain. The Turtles enter cyberspace, a digital domain where information takes physical form and the boundaries between data and reality dissolve. The Battle Nexus gave fighters a structured arena with defined rules and an audience. Cyberspace gives its villains an entire ungoverned operating environment with no referees and no walls. Once inside, the scope of the problem expands fast. A digital version of the Shredder emerges as a threat within cyberspace. The Cyber Shredder repeatedly attempts to escape cyberspace and invade the real world, harassing the Turtles during their search for Splinter's data. The Turtles find themselves in a virtual domain where data exists as scattered code that can be sought and recompiled. A villain's lair and staging ground that has no physical boundaries, no lockdown that holds, and no distance too great to cross. Donatello, who blames himself for Splinter's decompiling into data, drives the urgency, while Leonardo's role involves helping his brothers locate Splinter's data bits across the entire expanse of the network. The cyberspace arc reaches its conclusion in the season finale, but by then, the damage of what cyberspace is has already been established, and that is the small version of the problem. The larger one is that cyberspace is not a contained threat. Dimension X is a physical space with its own atmosphere and geography. You could draw a map of it, seal a portal to it, or hold it at a distance. Cyberspace has none of those vulnerabilities. It is pure information architecture, a digital domain where locations are server clusters, where terrain is code, and where the only way to navigate is through interfaces designed to translate abstract data into something a biological brain can process. The Cyber Shredder doesn't rule a kingdom, he rules a network, and that distinction is catastrophic because it means the threat scales with technology itself. Every device that connects to the internet is a potential door he can push against. The Turtles' search for Splinter's data bits forces them to operate inside that infrastructure with none of the physical tools that normally protect them. People sometimes conflate cyberspace with ordinary virtual reality, and that confusion is worth killing right now. Virtual reality is a simulation of a physical environment experienced through a headset. Cyberspace in Back to the Sewer is described as a digital realm where data itself has substance, where code has weight, and where the villain's army is not rendered as avatars but exists as functional operational units within the architecture. The Cyber Shredder isn't playing a game inside a simulation. He is operating as an actual intelligence within the actual internet structure, with the capacity to deploy agents, access systems, and eventually cross the boundary back into the physical world. The episode Tempus Fugit establishes the time window as the portal mechanism, not as a login screen. This is not virtual reality. It is a dimension that happens to be made of information, and the show treats that difference as a genuine existential threat. What cyberspace ultimately proves is that the TMNT multiverse was never just about mystical geography. Every dimension in this video represents something the Turtles cannot punch their way out of, and cyberspace is the version that can reach into your actual home through your actual screen. The framework the series builds across its various continuities isn't simply a collection of exotic locations. It's a catalog of the limits of physical force, and cyberspace, by existing as a space where data itself is a landscape and where the villain can walk out of your monitor, is the most unsettling proof of that principle the franchise ever committed to. Spirit Realm, the stakes escalate immediately because where the Battle Nexus offered fighters a structured arena and cyberspace offered a digital environment with physical consequences, the Spirit Realm, as depicted in the 2012 series, offers no guarantees at all. No rules, no referee, no clear distinction between the living and the dead. The Spirit Realm serves as an active domain where conflicts extend beyond the physical world. The Spirit Realm allows communication between the living and the dead through deliberate spiritual practice. But that communication comes through meditation, through deliberate spiritual practice, through channels the Turtles have to learn to open, not simply walk through. In IDW Comics, Splinter finds catharsis in the spirit after his death, communicating with his sons through meditation, which frames the realm as a place of rest and connection rather than combat. A reading that the 2012 series both inherits and violently complicates. In the 2012 telling, the spirit realm departs sharply from the ordinary version of what an afterlife is supposed to be. Most fictional afterlives operate on recognizable logic, judgment, reward, punishment, peaceful rest, and even within the TMNT franchise's own IDW comics, the spirit realm functions as a continuation of a master's mentorship, a place where a father can still watch his sons and speak to them. The 2012 series strips away that comfort entirely. The dimension is not called a resting place. It is a domain of raw spiritual energy inhabited by ghosts and ethereal beings, and those beings are not necessarily friendly. The conflict that spills into it is not a dispute between old friends. It is a war being fought through Splinter's fears, which access to the spirit dimension requires deliberate spiritual practice and emotional readiness. The narrative treats the spirit realm as territory to be contested, not a destination to be reached, and the fact that it is inhabited by ghosts who can act as combatants or obstacles turns it into something closer to a war zone than a sanctuary. Where Dimension X had geography and cyberspace had architecture, the spirit realm has intention. It is not inert space. The 2012 series establishes it as responsive to spiritual energy, to emotion, to the specific fears of the people trying to enter it, which means it cannot be mapped or predicted the way other dimensions can. Shinigami's use of Splinter's fears as an access key is not a minor plot point. It is the mechanism that defines the entire dimension's relationship to anyone who enters it. If the space itself opens in response to fear, then the act of entering it is already an act of vulnerability. The turtles are not stepping into a neutral environment, they are stepping into a space that reads them, reacts to them, and uses their own emotional attachments against them before the fight even begins. That is a fundamental departure from every other dimension in this video, all of which present themselves as physical or structural challenges first. The result is a realm that exists without the safety net that other dimensions at least pretend to offer. Dimension X has its own laws of physics. Cyberspace has its own logic of information flow. The spirit realm in the 2012 series has neither. It is only the spiritual residue of the people who occupy it, and that residue can be weaponized. The turtles must develop spiritual discipline to navigate the spirit realm, a burden placed on the brother whose heart is most open to what waits on the other side. The show does not resolve this cleanly. The spirit realm does not hand the turtles a victory and send them home. It absorbs their father's fears, it tests their spiritual fortitude, and it remains open. The door doesn't close behind them. The final image is of a space that is still there, still inhabited, still capable of being breached, and still operating on rules that have nothing to do with the physical world the turtles know how to fight in. Spirit World, where the spirit realm of the 2012 series affected a single conflict, Splinter's fears, his son's training, a war fought on one front. The spirit plane in the 2012 TV series is the foggy home of the spirits, where the turtles went to train before returning to New York. It is a place one of them is physically displaced to, against his will, and the dimension's properties are such that his brothers cannot simply follow. Within the Great Beyond, the dimension's character is established through everything Michelangelo encounters. The afterlife is described as both inviting and dangerous, rendered in vibrant violets and ethereal blues that replace the heavy black inks of the New York City scenes. The visual language of the book shifts entirely to signal that the rules of this space are not the rules of the one the reader has been inhabiting. The landscapes are surreal and painterly, not drawn with the same line work as the city streets, which means the dimension does not merely exist next to the physical world. It has a fundamentally different texture, a different visual grammar, a different logic of space that the reader can see, even if the characters cannot fully explain. And the portals that enable travel through it, jagged, glowing, described as capable of tearing the page, suggest that the barrier between dimensions is not a membrane or a veil. It is something violent, something that leaves marks on the fabric of the story itself. Michelangelo has the strongest connection to the turtles' past human lives, and that connection is not incidental to his displacement. It is the mechanism of it. The narrative places him face to face with his mother from their prior human incarnation within the Great Beyond, a reunion that only works because the afterlife dimension is structured around spiritual continuity rather than biological one. The human lives they lived before their mutation are not dead history. They are active, present, and reachable, but only from this space, only through this portal, and only by the brother whose heart holds that history most tightly. The central conflict of the arc involves the literal soul of Master Splinter, with Shinigami using Splinter's fears as the key to access the spirit dimension, the same mechanism that defined the 2012 spirit realm deployed here against the Turtles' father in a space that has no walls, no guards, and no jurisdiction outside of spiritual law. The skeptic's first response is that none of this is real, that the Great Beyond is a dream sequence, a meditation sequence, a narrative device that lets the book explore Michelangelo's emotional life without committing to the dimension as an actual place. But the arc's treatment contradicts that reading. Michelangelo does not imagine his mother. He meets her in a space that has its own landscapes, its own portals, its own internal logic of cause and effect, and, critically, his physical absence from the real world while he is there is treated by the narrative as a genuine problem his brothers must solve. They cannot reach him by phone or by searching the sewers. They need to find another portal, another way through, which means the book treats the Great Beyond as a real location with real barriers to entry, not a subjective experience. The art confirms what the plot requires. The dimension is drawn differently because it is different, rendered in a way that no dream sequence in the series achieves, in a way that signals to the reader that they are watching a character move through an actual space. A viewer would repeat this tomorrow. The spirit world in the Mirage comics is the one place the Turtles cannot all go together.